Hi, this is Heather with Bootleg Legal, and this lesson is about how to select a lawyer. As you know, as I said throughout this course, there are definitely going to be times when you do require the assistance of a lawyer. There's a reason that our legal education is often very expensive. It's difficult, it's thorough, it's long, and there's nothing that I could do. And an online course that could even come close to the knowledge of a licensed attorney in their practice area. So how do you pick a lawyer? What do you look for, right? So the first thing you're going to want to look for, obviously, is competence, right? Do they know what they're doing in their particular practice area in which you need their assistance? I've noticed a trend ever since the crash of 2008, which hit the legal field a lot harder than it hit everywhere else. And the legal field never fully recovered to the levels that it was prior to 2008. And what I've noticed is there are a lot of people going out on their own, starting small businesses. I did around that exact time. But even since then, there are people coming out of law school who have never actually worked under another attorney. I had the good fortune of being trained by a big law firm for several years and then a small law firm for a year prior to starting my own practice. So I felt pretty confident in my chosen practice areas. But even then, when I would branch out to new practice areas, I would have to take a lot of steps to bring myself up to par. This included everything from taking a lot of CLEs to finding a mentor in those practice areas to help me when I got stuck on something, all the way down to like even teaching law school to make sure that I filled in any gaps of knowledge that I might have, right? But this is not what a lot of lawyers are doing. There are a lot of lawyers out there who are expanding their practice areas without actually fully knowing what they're doing. And sometimes they suffer from Dunning-Kruger, which is this, look it up if you're not super familiar with it, but what it basically means is when somebody's new at something and they have low competence, because they don't yet know what they don't know, they perceive their competence to be much larger than it is. Whereas experts in the field tend to understate their competence because they're fully aware of how much they know and they don't know. So there's a lot of that going on. I see a lot of attorneys just stretching for practice areas they barely know. I'll learn on the job. I'll learn as I go. And sometimes that can work with transactional work, although really what you're just doing is you're delaying the problem to down the road when somebody finds out that the contract doesn't fully work for them. It doesn't really work well in litigation. You find out pretty soon. I've litigated against brand new attorneys who've never worked for anybody else. And I mean, I had one of them. He could have objected to evidence that got us about $50,000 more in this case, and he should have objected to it. There were issues with it, and he didn't even know to object to it. He didn't even know. I mean, there were so many balls that he dropped in that case that made it so easy to win because he didn't know what he didn't know. So you want to make sure that an attorney has competence in the areas that you need them to have. Now, how do you find this out, though, right? Because obviously they're not going to come right out and say, I don't know what I'm doing. But they do know that they're not allowed to misrepresent their skills or competence, that could get them in a lot of trouble. So simply, when you're talking to them the first time, I would say, can you give me an example of a time that you helped, a client in my situation or a similar client, a similar place in the market, or, you can even say, what's the biggest transaction that you've worked on? What kind, that's one I use when I'm hiring somebody, because they'll say, yeah, I do corporate transactional work. Yeah, but have you done mergers and acquisitions? And they're thinking, well, I did that one. So I tend to ask, what's the biggest deal that you've worked on, right? And you can sort of gauge where they are and what their experience level is. You can even ask where they've, worked before and trying to piece together their background and make sure they haven't learned it on the go or they aren't currently learning it on the go. I see people who, I'm a criminal lawyer, and then suddenly 2 weeks later they're a landlord-tenant lawyer, and then 4 months after that they're trying to do business law. And I can't emphasize enough how dangerous they can be, because they give the illusion of competence and you will rely on them and you can end up in real trouble. Okay, so competence is the first one. Number 2, billing. So, it's pretty common knowledge that people have a lot of resentment towards lawyer billing. They either think that legal costs are too expensive, and that's true for a lot of them, or they think that lawyers pad the bill. I'm definitely aware of that happening at certain law firms. It is not uncommon. Not at law firms that I particularly worked at, but I've actually spoken to lawyers at other law firms who have admitted that the pressure to meet billable hour requirements is so high that they know a lot of lawyers pad the bill. So you're going to want to ask about what their transparency of billing is. Do they offer projects on a flat fee basis? Do they ask for pre-authorization before they charge something? You may be emailing them with what you think is a simple question that they can just say, oh, yes, you can do that, or no, you can't. And they might go off for 2 or 3 hours to research it without telling you in advance. So ask, would you say to me in that situation, hey, this is going to take me 2 to 3 hours. Is that okay? Before you do it. You know, I have a general rule with my client that if it's something I can answer in 15 minutes, we're both cool with me just answering it, right? Or 30 minutes actually. But if it's something that's going to require more than, 30 minutes, hour, 2 hours of research, I'm going to tell them ahead of time, yeah, it's going to take 2 hours of research. Is that okay, right? So ask them what they do in those situations. Maybe even ask them, what their average client your size spends a year on legal. And you can really gauge whether that's even in your budget, and you can sort of extrapolate from there that either they may be pushing services that you can't afford, or they may be overbilling for the services that you absolutely do need. And so, it's fair to ask, what their average numbers are. And then the last thing is, get a sense of their vibe and trust your gut. Nonverbal communication is 90% of communication. So when you're speaking to them, be really honest with yourself of whether you like them. Do you believe them? Do they seem to be an authentic person, or are they overcompensating? If you detect even the slightest amount of condescension or cockiness, I would sort of ask more questions and follow up more and keep engaging them, because when, a lawyer is truly confident and competent at what they do, most of them don't feel the need to oversell or to try to sound smarter than you. Quite the contrary, they should probably be positive and sharing information with you. I know that some of the larger law firms have this rule that they can only provide so much information, at which point, no, that's it. You're on the clock now. I'm going to need a retainer. There are so many good small firms, boutique firms, or small sole proprietorships, or lawyers who honestly are really good attorneys. They just got tired of the law firm game. And these lawyers are perfectly willing to have just, a lot more transparency with you and give you information regardless of how much it lines their pockets. Look for those people. If they're trying to penny pinch and charge you out of the gate for every little thing, even your initial consultation, be a little hesitant, because there are lawyers who won't do that. And if they're starting out on that foot, then, they're probably driven by money. And in my experience, any lawyer whose primary motivator is money, probably not going to be the best lawyer for you, because they may overstate your risk in certain areas to convince you to spend legal money that you can't afford, or realistically just could wait to spend that money later. If they're driven by money, they may be more driven to pad the bill. If their sole motivator is money, they may, they may do anything that they can. They may sell positions that are untenable so that you'll stay in fights longer than you need to. And it's not to say that obviously, you have to find a lawyer who doesn't care about money. Obviously, we all need money to live. But you can really tell if that's why they're in this game. Did they go to law school because they thought it was lucrative, and they're trying, and every step of every day is about building their book of business and making as much money as possible? Or do they thoroughly enjoy helping people? Do they have their own narrative? What's their narrative of their career path story? That's a really fun one to get into. And if they don't have one, if they haven't spent that time thinking about and reevaluating why I'm in this, why I do this, what motivates me to help people, and do I even enjoy the helping people aspect, or is it just something I have to stomach in order to make money? And I know that a lot of people, unfortunately, are forced to seek legal counsel at a time that it's urgent that they find one. There's a sense of urgency about it. And so you may feel like, hey, I found someone willing to do it and they can turn it around quickly, and I should just go with them. And that may be true if it's really urgent, but you'd be better off doing the work and finding someone that can be a really good fit for you long term. And once they know your business and they've worked on a few projects with you, and they're aware of what your priorities are, what your particular, every client has a different preference for how much information we give them. Do they want a whole memo explaining their options, or do they just want you to outline them, or do they just want you to tell them what to do, right? There are, once they know all of these things about you, it's so much easier to work with them going forward. And to that end, you're also going to want to find somebody that has experience in maybe like a generalist. I would consider myself like the general practitioner, like a GP doctor, who I can do the vast majority of things that a small business will need. And for the few things like patents, which I don't do, I have somebody that I can refer who does do them. But I'm the generalist. You come to me first, I can find you lawyers in other practice areas if you do end up needing those. But I have a very broad practice area so that I can serve most of my clients' needs. So I would look for somebody like that if you're looking to build a long-term relationship. But at the end of the day, and I cannot emphasize this enough, trust your gut, trust your ability to pick up on nonverbal communication. And then if you're still on the fence, maybe ask for references, right? Can I speak to somebody else who's worked with you long term? I've seldom had people ask that question, but I have had people ask that question. I run my business completely on a referral basis, so that everybody comes to me kind of pre-qualified, and usually, so they're already coming to me with a referral from somebody that they trust. So I don't usually go through that step myself, but if that's not how you've come to know this attorney, then definitely ask for somebody that you can speak to that can tell you what it's like to work with them. I think that's it. Thank you.